Recording is on. Hello again. My name is Vladimir Izmalkov. I'm here to present the talk, Technical Writer's Skill Tree. And let's start. So basically, I work at Canonical as a technical author. I have quite a lot of years of experience working with software documentation, and I have like a PhD degree. I am a member of ISTC, full member, and I consider myself somewhat of a Doxus code advocate. It's a short summary. You can find me on LinkedIn or GitHub. Feel free to chat if you have any questions. Before we start, analyzing the skill tree itself, let me talk a little bit about my own personal experience. Throughout my career, I've actually tried quite a lot of roles, and you can see some of them here. For example, aerospace engineer is my original idea of what my career would be. The university degree I've got was literally rocket science and spaceship design. But I also tried to be a software developer, which was a little bit of a boring to me, to be honest. I was a website administrator, and then I became a researcher. Was researcher for quite a while. Then I got my degree and actually became a head of a research team. I also been the head of an IT department, literally of IT department of the whole organization. And at some point, I switched to technical writing because I understood that my skill set is quite close to technical documentation, and that's something I enjoy working with. So why not? I became technical writer and got to the senior position. I even tried a few projects on the side as a freelance technical writer. And I have experience leading 2 different documentation teams, like cross-functional documentation teams, including some analysts and some other people, for example, DocOps engineers. So finally, I started my international career, and I specifically was able to relocate as a technical writer here in the UK, which I find quite an accomplishment because, again, as English language becomes my professional tool, I have to compete against people who use it as a native language. So the competition is quite high for me, as you can understand. But let's get back to the, why I talk about all the roles that I had previously. Basically, I see that, at least in my case, the career was quite, the line of my career was quite curvy, let's call it like that. Quite a lot of turns, and there are multiple reasons why there were such turns, but I want to share with you this slide. So basically, what I expected my career to be when I was naive and young is that it would be always ascending, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but there will be some milestones on the way to being very senior, very wise and old. That's what I imagined. Well, in reality, it was quite different. There were quite a lot of turns sideways. So I realized that the career path of someone related to documentation can be very different, and sometimes you have to make adjustments. And specifically, the reasons to making some adjustments and turns to the side can be one of these examples. For me personally, it was probably the first 2. Some shifts in the industry and evolving personal goals made me do the career changes I did. And for other people, it can be all kinds of different reasons. But the important stuff I want to talk about basically is the career specifically of a technical writer, which I do believe, after all the experience of all different careers, is one of the most versatile, one of the most complex, as in a technical writer can be so many different skills, can have so many different skills, can be so many different things. It depends from company to company. The requirements are very, very different. So when you see a post somewhere into the internet, like a job post, job advertisement, you have to read it through thoroughly to understand what kind of technical writer they're looking for and how applicable your experience there. Technical writer is very close to lots of adjacent professions, and sometimes we even required to do some of their work, some testing, some even coding, sometimes subject matter expertise, some analysis, lots of stuff. And what you enjoy in the profession can be very different. I personally enjoy actually having this diversity, always having something new to learn, something new to challenge myself with, you see. So that's why I think this profession is such a great fit for me. because I can learn all this stuff and never get bored. But it creates an interesting experience for people when they find themselves to be technical writers. They kind of struggle to formulate what kind of technical writers they are. That's why I came up with an idea how to actually address that problem, at least try to do that. So basically, that's a little bit naive short summarization of what I came up with. We have some kind of roles, like some kind of specialization for the role. So you can specialize in actual writing, being the writer. You can have these skills that I have these try to create some funny versions of those, like shield of clarity, type of query, and stuff like that. So basically, you specialize on actually written communication, writing content, maybe some expertise in linguistics could help there. Maybe just your experience working with all kind of documentation and texts could help there. Who knows? The next specialization I would call engineer, and it's called here engineer. Basically, again, engineers are good at technology, so you should be tech curious, I guess. You should understand what other engineers saying, so you can document that, and you can probably do something around these technologies. If you have the curiosity, you have the knowledge, and usually technical writers, they do have quite an insight. So basically, you maybe can even build some prototypes with such technologies. As an engineer, you might be interested to do so. That's what is expected out of engineer specialization, at least as I can see it. Then we have like docs tools stage, as they call it. And the tools can be very different. Me, myself, I'm a docs as code advocate, so I would be talking about mostly like Git as a version control system, some linters, some lightweight markup languages like Markdown, some CI/CD pipelines to build the docs. This is my jam, but the tool can be different. It could be Microsoft Office, which actually has a surprising amount of functions in there, so you can be quite an experienced professional working with that. We're working with all the styles and all the features. But there are other tools, for example, Data and some other build systems that you can use to build docs. Why not? Basically, this is a specialization into the doc building tools that could be later heavy, just for producing quite heavy documents. And also, there is a specialization which we need to mention is a marketeer, which shows an illustration of a bot basically here. Well, some technical documentation can be a little bit, on the advertising part too. Like a little bit of marketing wouldn't hurt, right? Especially in these smaller startups, technological startups, I've encountered quite a few cases where you need to advertise your product through your technical documentation, because again, your targeted audience will be making decisions based on your documentation while they familiarizing themselves with your product. So why not? It's a way to do it, I guess. So here are 4 roles. If we talk a little bit less, in a funny terms of their skills, but more like concrete, here is a description of the first class, the writer class. So basically, we're talking about written communication specialization. Again, this is a rough estimation. This is not an exhaustive list of what you can know to advance here, and you don't have to know everything, right? If you know everything, I'm not sure who you are. I'm not sure there is even an exhaustive list of things you can know here, but still, there is a direction quite clearly stated as a written communication is the gem here. So everything related, it can be writing skills. You can know like structured writing or simplified technical English or other control language authoring. You can have extensive experience in terminology and how to actually fix the terminology in the whole documentation sets, which is quite an achievement on its own. Also, there are some standards like style guides and the standards for accessibility and inclusivity, and also copy editing skills. Lots of that is very useful in written communication, of course. And also the design. You can have some illustrations being included, but you also can design the textual content too through the information architecture. You can just structure it in a better way and more aligned with the needs of your user. Basically, the context for these skills can be also relevant here. For example, in written communication, the contents can be the language you're using, because some of these skills would be applicable in another language, for example, the information architecture. Some of them are not, or less so. The simplified technical English won't be applicable for Russian language, for example. Your audience can make some difference, but I believe less so. So written communication specialist is mostly dependent on the language. I do believe so. You can maybe experiment a little bit with audiences. The engineers class, well, you are basically having all the aspects of engineer, as in the curiosity, the being brave about diving into some technology, learning all the bits and pieces, and building a prototype of yourself. You're that brave, you are that technological about it. Why not? If it's your jam. But genuinely, if you already have been familiar with some area, some subject matter, basically this is your current skill set. Maybe you cannot express your curiosity as a skill, maybe you can. But in this case, this is your context. If you know like software development in some particular language like Python, well, okay, you have these skills for sure, like the hard skill. Some of these skills are cross-applicable to other programming languages. If you know Python, it will be easier for you to learn some other languages already, right? But it's still not directly applicable, so there is a problem, a little bit of a problem here. So it's still context heavy, but it's hard to define. It all depends on your subject matter expertise. It can be rather close, for example, a different kind of a program in the same programming language, or a different program with a different language, but the language is very similar to what you're used to. Or, you can be very curious about this language and have some initial knowledge, but you haven't experienced yet. So the context can be very different. We don't talk about that a lot. But the general cross applicable skills are automation, building prototypes, and just the skills of exploring, just the skills of learning new skills. That's a thing. Basically, if you have that, you won't have a problem to onboard with any other new area, I hope. That's an engineer class going bravely into the deep. Docs tools Sage. Well, again, different tools you will be using, different skills. If you're used to using Docs as code and a particular doc set, for example, GitHub with some IDE with it, some lightweight markup language like Markdown, that's your jam. Why not? It's easier for you to learn other tools and markup languages if you already know one, of course. So it's a little bit cross applicability here too. It's much easier actually. So it's a lot of cross applicability. But still, your tool set also defines your area of expertise in this case. So you can expand this tool set. You can learn more and more tools, and you can learn the existing tools to such an advanced degree that you will become a very well-known specialist and expert in the topic. Why not? There are some areas that I've summarized here, like storage, delivery, and automation, but they can be very different from tool to tool. Some tools are more flexible in that, some tools are less, some topics are cross-applicable, some are not. So the context, again, is quite hard to define here. For the marketing, it's a little bit simpler, as in a lot of cross-applicability. If you have it in you, if you can, silver tongue your thoughts into the text in such a way that it's very appealing to people, makes them think, makes them be engaged with you and inspired. It's a skill that you can apply to very different situations and documentation sets. Why not? Basically, the marketing skills, well, I'm not an expert in the area, but I roughly separated them into the messaging, the strategy, and the brand. You can do it differently. The important thing here is that the whole area of marketing is also kind of a branch for you to specialize in. It's somewhat of a specialization. Some people prefer to work that way. Some people avoid that. And you for yourself can decide what kind of a technical writer you are, right? So one more class that you haven't seen yet is a documentation leader, basically leading a team of documentation specialists. Why it wasn't shown previously? Because usually it's a bonus class. When you go through one of the classes, achieving some kind of level of seniority, having some experience, you have seen some docs for sure. Basically, at this point of experience, you probably have an option to lead your own team. And fortunately or not, that also requires a different skill branch. It requires kind of a skill you can see in a leader, right? So you should have a vision where you're going to actually lead the people in that direction. You should have the people management skills to actually inspire people, to drive them to work, in a good environment and in a sustainable way. And you also should have some operation skills, as in literally the Jira tickets and all the plannings and all the metrics and KPIs. That also needs to be done, and that's managers who do that, or team leaders. So yeah, here's that class. What else can we say? If we put all the skills specifically applicable to all these specializations on some kind of a diagram like here, we can see that there are quite a lot of options. And I also added the soft skills at the very top here, as you can see. It wasn't anywhere in previous classes because I do believe it's useful for any technical writer. We, at the end of the day, specialist in technical communication, yes, but that doesn't limit us to only written communication. Usually, technical writer's job is also to be able to communicate with subject matter experts, to conduct an interview, to just get additional details, to get some ideas from them, to be able to understand when they actually, talking to you from a position of expertise, but they are missing some details, so you can see the white spots quite clearly. You being able to communicate efficiently with them is crucial part for any role, I do believe. So again, for any role it's applicable. It's most closely related to marketing, to the BART, but it's not only applicable to the role. That's why I put it separately. And that's where I started thinking, well, actually, we don't have to choose only one direction, right? So if we go into just writing skills, it doesn't mean that we cannot learn marketing, because if you want to switch the branch, switch the direction you're going, you don't have to go back. It's not like a road sign, right, that you passed like a couple miles ago. You don't have to go back to go another road. You can actually go to the new direction right away from the point you are, and you won't lose your progress. That's a great trick. So basically, it's like a compass. You have all the directions in front of you, and if you go to a huge expertise in one direction, you can immediately change direction and go, another way. In real life compass, you can go the opposite way, and that would, negate the progress you've made. In this case, it won't. So it's rather hard to see on the two-dimensional map, but whatever direction you go, you can make progress. You won't lose the experience you already have, but you'll gain new experience. So it's actually can be quite beneficial for a technical writer to explore new directions, all I'm saying. So with that thought in mind, we get back to this diagram, right? So the career path is not a two-dimensional, graph that just goes ascending indefinitely or until the end of the life. It's not like that. It's maybe even it's not a 3D diagram like on the right. It may be a multi-dimensional thing that could make turns in all kind of dimensions that you are not realizing yet, right? And all that means that you can make progress while the projection on one particular plane of existence, for example, the written communication, won't change. You will be making progress on some other plane in some other dimension. That's how it works. Unfortunately, it's really hard to imagine in your spatial mind, but still, believe me, that progress in one area can help you even in other areas. There are some cross-applicable skills, and there is also some synergy in having skills complementing each other. When you have so many skills in one branch and you start acquiring skills in other branch, you can see how you can apply them together and have synergy. So that's how we become superhero. You basically learn all the skills from all the branches, you become a superhero. That's guaranteed. You have all the skills to compete on the market in any obstacle. Any job posting for you is doable. You are the superhero. You can do anything, really. Why not? Uh, it's really interesting to see a person who actually realizes that, again, developing a skill in a new branch is only benefits the career. Of course, some people prefer to become a very narrowly specialized expert. That's fine too. I'm just saying you can explore other branches, and that could help you. There's a lot of synergy. At least I find it very pleasurable. It's great experience for you. Maybe for you it will be too. Maybe not. Everyone is shown. And the main idea, you should understand that you and only you will decide what kind of superhero you want to be. Maybe you want to be a superhero without any marketing at all. You want to be honest to truth, technical writer, but doing everything else greatly. Why not? It's your decision. It's only you who can decide on that. So unlimited potential is quite an interesting thing. You see, having anything unlimited laying in front of you can be overwhelming almost, right? So we kind of need to have our bearings and to navigate this unlimited field of opportunities. And it's kind of hard to do so when you have many dimensions. Like I said, even three-dimensional space can be not enough to draw something like that. So how do we do that? Well, basically, skill trees are quite useful to track progress and track skills in games, basically role-playing games, RPGs. And that's where I was looking for in the inspiration for this talk that we're having right now, which literally called this technical writer skill tree, right? And the initial, idea for skill trees in games comes from a graph theory. There is in graph theory, there is a definition of undirected graph. It just pairs nodes in such a way that every node is connected, like between any nodes in the graph, there is only exactly one path. So only and exactly. That's an interesting theme. Basically, every node is connected by two connections. There is usually a root of the tree, and you can follow up to any node. The root can be quite long through many nodes, but still, there is only one path. So you cannot go in circles. You cannot, get lost. Everything's kind of good. Skill trees are usually like that. Skill trees in games are sometimes a little bit different, as in you can have multiple passes. But the main idea is that you can, from the root, from the the very start of your career, get to any node. That's the rule. You can get everywhere. That means that technically you can become a superhero. You can learn everything. Although it's indefinite, it's kind of infinite field, but still you can develop yourself in all the directions. Maybe not at once, but one by one, for example, but still you can become an all-rounded specialist rather than narrowly scoped. That's possible. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated though. As you can see, it's a little bit, it becomes quite convoluted if we try to map all the directions for all the branches. Even if we add some color coding, it can be quite hard to navigate. And I even skipped a few of the nodes here because it didn't fit the slide. That's basically my best attempt to fit them in, and it's rather bad. I know. It looks convoluted. That's for a reason. Like, it's hard to navigate it in such a way. So what we can do, well, first of all, I want to recommend some of the resources I found useful. Basically, there are some attempts to map the skills of a technical writer. Not done by me. It's probably like not worth the effort for me alone trying to do that. So there are some organizations that already tried. Why not use them? It's quite a big resources. You can search for yourself. That actually have some useful insights on what kind of skills you can have if you are a specialist in a technical communication, what kind of specialist you can be, what kind of direction for your skills there could be. Why not? But if we talk specifically about the classes I mentioned before, like the specialization, we can at least try to go a little bit deeper than just, directions like clarity, standards, design. We can potentially explore the exact skills that are needed for this class And at some point, we will even think about the proficiency in each skill. So, for example, this is a writer class example. You can see that I go down to information architecture, illustration, basically the same we already seen. But there is a difference between the approaches. So on the left, we have the complete skill tree, which lets us explore the possibilities. And to do that, to explore the possibilities, I totally recommend the resources that I mentioned. Basically, these people already thought a lot about all kind of different skills you can have. And, you know, having somewhat of an exhaustive list from a multitude of people is much better than having somewhat of an exhaustive list from just me. By nature, many people working on this problem would be much better because they have different perspectives. But the problem with it is it's hard to build, and the scheme itself, the diagram, and it's hard to use for, you know, requires a lot of details. It's a huge resolution. It's hard to see in there. And it's hard to visualize. It's hard to actually have a meaningful, you know, visual representation of it that fits all the information and you can understand and read it. So a single role skill tree, like we did for the writer, the written communication specialist, it's actually much easier to build, much easier to use, and it's easy to see, it's easy to visualize, although it has a negative effect of limited scope, so you only see it for one skill tree at a time. Well, at least we can do it with some limitation, right? So that's where it comes useful to use a radar chart to actually be able to address each of the branches of the skill tree separately, because they're somewhat individual. So you can build a skill tree in each branch. You can even understand what skills from a skill tree you have, and then map it on some kind of radar chart with all the branches there. You see, you're combining all the dimensions on this chart. I think that actually is a quite interesting representation. It is combines all these scoped specific skill trees into this singular diagram that you can read. It's a combined representation. Unfortunately, it also has some downsides. Specifically, it needs the grading system. You might see that the crucial part of the diagram itself is these 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like numbers, right? And circles. And basically, we build the diagram by deciding, okay, I have writing at a level of 3. But how do you decide it? Well, that's where you need the grading system. That's exactly the tricky part about it. So basically, for the writer class, you can have something like that. It's just an example. It's not a realistically like useful grading system, but it's an example that can give you an idea. Basically, on level 1, you have super basic skills, barely useful. You just started. At level 5, you're an expert. You can literally, you know, conduct lectures. You can teach others. You can do some organization-wide, you know, serious changes and practices implementation. Why not? The details can be very, very different from different contexts. For example, in different organizations, there are different requirements for a technical writer. So in some organization, level 2 would be about, you know, controlling terminology and adjusting targeted audience. But in some organization, this won't be required on level 2, and it will be required much later, you see? So the context here is important. So in some context, for example, in the context of your current organization with its, you know, set of solutions and set of expectations, this could be a grading system. So the grading system makes sense in the context of some specific set of requirements. Then you can build all these levels. So this is a level 1 of meeting the requirements. This is a level 2. This is a level 3, and so on and so on. That's an interesting detail. And basically, sometimes you just need to project from one context to another. So basically, if you have one skill that's very, very close to another, but you don't have the specific skill required, you can say that, yeah, but it's almost like 50% applicable here. So I already know Markdown. It's not that hard to learn ASCII doc after that, right? It's a little bit different of a syntax, but the idea is the same. The usage is the same. All of the behavior is more or less the same. It's just different syntax, a little bit more complex functionality. So let's say like 50%. That's what you can technically do. You can project your existing skill, even if it not matches the grading system, but you can actually project it, as a partial, as a projection of a vector, usually, just a smaller. You're projecting it in another direction, so it becomes smaller. It cannot become bigger. So that's why the grading system can be a little bit more flexible than, just are you comparing yourself against some kind of job requirements? Do you have all these skills 100%? Sometimes you do, but sometimes you're not, and that's where it can be very, very useful skill to project. I don't have experience with data, but I worked with this and this software, and I understand what data is. I would love to learn. I actually used Oxygen editor, and I know what XML is, so it won't be a problem for me to learn data from this point. You see? So you're projecting. You won't have 100% met requirement, but you will have at least something like 30 or 40. This attempt alone will put you, like in front of some other competitive candidate that might have just 0 because they just honestly said, I never worked with data. But you gone extra mile to actually try to project. So that's what we can do, actually. We can map the requirements of any particular organization on, the radar chart as our target. And then we can compare ourselves against these requirements to see whether we fit or not. Why not? It's a great exercise, I do believe. If you have a job requirements as a job posting or something like that, it's actually a great start for a grading system. It's all the parameters are already there. You just need to follow up on them. Of course, the grading itself, how many points you have, would be probably like a personal touch. It's like a very manual process, unfortunately. But still, it's better than nothing, and you can see whether you fit or not, and you can see whether you can even compensate some of the lackings. You see, if you lack one skill, but you actually have more experience than they require in a different skill, but in the same area, it can compensate, actually, right? Sometimes it's not as easy in job posting. Sometimes they're, very strict on their requirements. Yeah, but we 100% want something with existing experience on that one. At least you can negotiate. You see, this logic puts you into a position to have a great visualization of where you are at the moment and what are you comparing yourself with. Basically, it gives you the perspective, the visualization. It can give you so many different things. You can compare yourself against the requirements. You can compare yourself against different candidates, even if it needs to be. You can compare different candidates if they apply into your organization, and you see all their CVs, which is actually quite interesting too and quite useful. You also can build your personal development. You can build such a thing, such a radar chart, and see, oh, but I have this rather low, and it's like showing. Why won't I build some skills on that and then go invest into this self-development? Why not? And again, this kind of understanding gives you motivation. It gives you clear insight into where you are at the moment, where you want to be. So it gives you a sense of progress. If next month you will be able to say, yeah, but now I'm like marketing, not level 1. I'm already closer to level 2. You see? So it gives you these milestones to live for, the achievements. Some people like that. Again, something about the job market and AI systems is just understanding what kind of technical writer you are helps you a lot to highlight your strong sides. When you actually have negotiations with your future employer, you can highlight why you are the greatest candidate of all, because you have all these strong sides that you actually know about from this diagram. You can highlight it to your employer because they usually don't have this chart. You do. So even if you build this chart, you actually need to use it. And showing this diagram alone to your employer probably won't be enough to persuade them. So you need to build your communication around showing them the value, showing them all these high spots, the strong sides. That's how you should probably address that, how you should use it. You also can use it for job market analysis. Why not? You can analyze a few job posts that you like. You can see what they actually usually requiring at which level. So on average, they will need like writing 3, leadership like 1 for this kind of a seniority role. Why not? This could help you again align better with the job market. But most importantly, the AI systems now is a critical height that's happening. You can see that AI system in some cases does a lot of things spectacularly good, and sometimes quite surprisingly bad. And it's quite unpredictable at that. That's a good thing about it. Basically, you're one of the best competitive advantages over AI is that you're responsible. If you make a mistake, I mean, you're responsible for that. AI system, not so much. It won't feel blame, and you cannot like literally fire it. It's no consequences, no changes. You can change, you can improve, so you can compete against AI systems like that. You can find synergy between your skills. Having experience in a lot of skills actually lets you perform better than AI, especially in complicated situations requiring complex approach. You see, when AI actually struggling to do that, and with a lot of creative space, when there is no guardrails, AI can create something magnificent, but all this space actually just gives the room to create something terrible too. So the more the space, the more the complex the product, the more of creative freedom you have, the easier it is for you to show that your experience matters and the synergy between your skills is actually something very interesting and desirable. So keep it in mind when you talk to your, managers or your future employers or even HR people. Let's summarize the key takeaways here. So basically, the technical writer technical writer role often requires a very diverse skills, right? The whole plethora of them that you can learn. It's a little bit overwhelming to me, but I like that. The skill tree model that I described, it helps you to map the growth and progress to, again, get you going, get you inspired. The radar chart specifically, it simplifies the overall view of different branches. It combines them together in a nice form that you can compare it. You see, you just need this grading system to be able to build it. And the multi-class development creates a superhero. That's the interesting idea that I have for you to think about, right? So having one particular skill, well, okay, you will be competing against people with the same skill. Maybe they're better, maybe they're not. But having multiple skills opens you to multiple opportunities to actually compete with all kind of different advantages and to basically show the value of your work better, to compete against other people and the AI systems better, just because of this synergy and experience that comes with it. Synergy of skills, basically. That's all that I have to talk about today. Sorry, that's all I have about this topic today. Thank you very much for listening. This is my contacts on LinkedIn. And are there any questions?
No immediate questions. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing this, and yeah, it's been interesting. I didn't know about ASD STE 100. That's an interesting standard, and I'm gonna look into more about what that is.
Okay, good to know. Let me stop the recording real quick, and we'll talk more about this.